Hello, this is Eric with Mind Melt Podcast, and today is the episode on MKUltra. I just want to do a quick intro really fast and just say that this was a very difficult episode to research, and I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you found the information to be useful. I had a lot of fun researching it, but it was really hard to get the timeline because it seems like the actual dates are so convoluted. So I just kind of bounced around. We talked about different aspects of it and kind of what they were doing. And then the end of it was really a lot of our opinion on what we thought, of this and other things. So we appreciate you listening. Check us out, and we will talk to you next week. Thanks. Bye.
By 1953, the race to control the mind is on. Biological agents, psychosurgery, brain implants, hypnosis, and drugs. These were investigated in more than 100 projects at universities, clinics, even prisons. Hundreds of researchers inside and outside the government were involved. According to this declassified document, a report on the combination of hypnosis and sodium pentothal, some techniques are officially considered to be experimental. And there's a warning that there will be many a failure, but also that every success with this method will be pure gravy. The results are shocking.
It's just almost impossible to grasp how this could actually be going on.
Dosing private citizens and its own scientists with LSD is just part of the CIA's mind control work. These declassified 1950s-era documents outline a secret CIA program to not only exploit the human mind, but also to create and deploy a hypnotically controlled agent.
It's an artificially created multiple personality where there's a new identity hidden behind an amnesia barrier. You call out this new identity with hypnotic verbal access codes and signals of some kind. You give it the assignment, whether it's courier, infiltration, or assassination assignment. The assignment's carried out. Then when you switch back to the regular person, they have no memory for anything to do with the entire operation.
Hey, what's going on, Mind Melters? This is Eric and Candra with the Mind Melt Podcast. And today we've got a pretty exciting episode for you. We're just going to go over MKUltra, one of the coolest, weirdest, worst government conspiracies ever to come true. And I just wanted to give you a quick update and just say thanks so much for all of the positive feedback that we've gotten through emails and Instagram and Facebook and things like that. I did want to just ask, if you care to take the time to send us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. You'll never know how much that helps, because when we get reviews and things like that, it pushes the podcast up into the rankings so that people will find us easier. And if you enjoy this podcast, that is a huge way that you can help the podcast keep going. So we're not going to ask for money or anything like that, but reviews are huge currency for podcasts. So that being said, we just want to thanks again so much for the awesome listeners, and it's been so much thus far recording these, and it's a really, really good time. And next week we're going to have my sister, Sierra Finnegan, come on the podcast, and she's going to talk about some prison overpopulations in the United States and just some of the issues that our current prison system has. And I'm really excited about that. Something that I'm very passionate about, especially in the state of Idaho. I mean, we have one of the worst prison populations in the country. So that being said, I also wanted to throw a little shout out to her because she's getting a clothing line started, and she is going to be releasing some really cool art through that, and I'm excited to see her get her website launched, and we're going to bring you some more information on that in the future as well. So, how are you doing, Candra?
Great. Hi, everyone. How's it going?
Yeah, I just kind of winded through that.
Yeah, good job. Good intro. Yeah, guys, we're really excited about this episode. We're going to chat about something that we've always been obsessed with, MKUltra, or
Yeah.
mind control.
Well, it's actually not what it stands for.
I know.
Oh, I didn't know if you knew that or not.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I knew that.
Yeah, well, no, I always thought it was. I thought it was like some sort of weird spin-off.
Oh, like
of,
they spell it different with a K or something?
Well, just, yeah, because a lot of times people don't think that the CIA's project names have any real meaning to them, or that they do. And from what I was reading online, like, on conspiracy theories, they a lot of times said that it stood for mind control, but with a K so that people
Oh.
didn't get it. But that's not actually really what it is.
Yeah,
So-
no, I just assumed that was just like some cool, like, people just know it as the mind control, like, project.
Right.
And
Yeah.
spelling it with a K, I just thought that was like a cool thing to do. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not cool.
I know, but I do know what it does stand for. It's kind of interesting.
What?
We'll get into that in the podcast. So,
All right. Keep me on my toes.
yeah. So another cool thing that we're gonna do is Candra's birthday is August 4th, and so we're gonna go up to Glacier and do a podcast up there,
Yeah, Glacier National Park in Montana.
and that'll be pretty cool because we're gonna
Camp.
record out in nature and just kind of talk about, how Glacier is and what a cool destination spot it is. I've actually never been there. Have you?
Nope.
No? Yeah, I didn't think so. And so it'll be kind of cool to give like a little review of it. And I've heard so many positive things about it,
Yeah, the pictures are amazing.
Yeah, it's really
Freaking
beautiful.
gorgeous.
So, and that's something that we might do, once a month or something, just kind of
Yeah.
go and travel and record a podcast
Yeah,
somewhere
make
else.
it more a little bit about traveling podcasts. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I mean it'd be just kind of cool. We'll still keep the discussion just kind of interesting and talk about whatever, kind of like our last episode. If you didn't hear that, that was called an in discussion episode, and we're gonna try to do those. pretty
We've gotten
frequently.
more feedback on those than the actual
Subject,
set
yeah.
topics. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which I think is pretty cool. It's mostly our friends though, just probably wanting to hear what's up with us.
yeah. When I wanted to start a podcast back in the day, I didn't want to do topics. I wanted to do more just kind of free form discussions and things like that, which is what I wanted to do with this podcast now. But with us being inexperienced, I thought that having topics would be a good way to get us kind of like familiarized with it and not struggle so much in conversation.
Yeah, I think having both, especially right now, is killer.
Yeah, and it's cool because this is a good way for you to get to know our personalities, but also get to know something interesting, and I listen to a lot of podcasts myself, and I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, and I listen to a lot of just weird podcasts on diet, and I love to learn things, and I think that's the best part of podcasting is that there's so much that you can learn through podcasting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you got to be careful too because there's a lot of crazy fucks out there that have podcasts like the Flat Earth podcast and things like that, and but they don't seem to last that long,
Yeah.
So but yeah, so let's get into it.
Cool.
I guess I'll just start.
Yeah.
So, MKUltra started in 1953. It was a government CIA orchestrated project that was basically the objective of it was to gain control of subjects' mind and have them give confessions or try to give up information if they're being interviewed. And there was a lot of crazy shit that happened with this. This CIA project only lasted about 19 years. Well, that's
Only.
not only. Yeah, that's a pretty fucking long time. And in the 19 years, it actually changed project names twice. So who knows if it's still going on.
Yeah.
But it did end in 1973 or 72. And when it ended, Sidney Gottlieb or
Yeah.
however you say his last name, ordered that all the documents be destroyed.
Right.
So it's by only sheer chance and miracle that people even know that this existed.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff we don't know.
Yeah, and that's the thing is they shredded all of the documents except for this one box that accidentally was placed into the financial section.
Wow.
And so someone randomly just was walking by and found this and was like, whoa, what the hell is this? And then used the
Human Research Program.
yeah, Freedom of Information Act to get this declassified.
Damn.
But even with it being declassified, there's a lot of, with CIA documents, oftentimes they're blacked out. So it's pretty crazy. But it was organized through the CIA and the U.S. Army Biological Warfare Program as well did a lot of these studies, and that was funded through the CIA. So it's pretty interesting. The CIA made it a real big effort to not have any of these organizations know that the CIA was actually funding them. Same with the doctor that we'll speak about later.
Yeah.
He actually was unaware that the CIA was funding him for a majority of the time that he was doing it. So the project started it out with volunteers. They started out with colleges, and basically how their main focuses was just kind of seeing what they could achieve with confessions and like truth serums and mind control through using substances such as LSD, scopolamine, mescaline, mushrooms, all these different drugs. And it's crazy. A lot of famous people actually were a part of MKUltra projects.
As a subject?
Yeah,
Wow.
as a volunteer.
Oh, I see.
Because there was a
Yeah.
lot of initially when it first started, there was a lot of volunteers.
Yeah.
It was done through colleges and like school, like Harvard. They would have like knowing, people come and volunteer and do LSD studies, and sometimes it would last for one day, sometimes for a week. But it was great at first because it was totally known to subjects. And so you got I think Ken Kesey, if I'm saying his name right, he was an author, and this is just based off memory. I didn't write this part down, but he was an author and he wrote a few really good books. And he talks about how it was a really good thing for him to experience this. It opened his mind up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then same with
I'd be down.
someone in the Grateful Dead, one
Cool.
of the artists in the Grateful Dead. I think it was the guitarist or something in the Grateful Dead was also a subject of it. Roseanne Barr, the comedian, she says that
yeah.
she was. I don't know. I couldn't find any actual like proof of that, but
Yeah.
she's a little fucking crazy. So either A, it made her crazy, or B, she made it up. So, but unfortunately with it being something that was volunteer oriented, the CIA started to realize that doing it with volunteers might not be the best way, because if they captured an enemy and were trying to get them to give up information, it's pretty unlikely that they would be a volunteer to this, right? So it escalated into using these as unwitting,
Yeah.
people. And that started to take a very dark turn. I think that there's even Sidney Gottlieb was quoted saying that they wanted to use people that were defenseless.
Yeah.
They wanted to target, the people that were in like the darkest fringes of the society, such as prisoners or people in mental hospitals or prostitutes,
Homeless people.
homeless people.
Basically people who wouldn't retaliate
Right.
too much
Yeah.
and have money to retaliate with. So
And children.
yeah.
And foster
So
carers.
sad.
And there was several quote unquote safe houses that were set up across the United States where they would have different kind of situations. And one of the safe houses was where Operation Midnight Climax happened. And that was a sub-project of MKUltra as well. So what Midnight Climax was a project where they would have in this quote unquote safe house, which doesn't sound very safe to me, but in this safe house, they would have prostitutes that were working for them administer LSD to unwitting Johns, which is, for those of you that don't know, a John is just someone that buys a prostitute. Maybe, I don't know if everybody knows that or not, but they would give LSD and other drugs to unwitting Johns, and they would like watch in a one-way mirror.
Yeah, so creepy.
And see how these people interacted, and we're trying to see if using sex combined with drugs would get these people to give up sensitive information. And a lot of these people that were going in there were actually working for the CIA.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was like they would try to lure their own people in there and try to get them to give up information.
Okay.
Or
Right.
army service members, military members.
So do they have targets for these men? Sometimes.
Yeah. It just, just depends. Sometimes it would be random. Sometimes they'd have targets. And so then it's kind of weird too, because they were trying to study different CIA operatives as well. And the way that they were trying to do this was by having their coworkers give them LSD unknowingly or other drugs as well. And so in the office, you might grab some coffee and then all of a sudden you start hallucinating. And this is fucking crazy because, I mean, first of all, back then LSD wasn't illegal, but it's like now knowing this history with how LSD is so, it's such a hardcore schedule. I mean, these psychedelics are extremely illegal now, and the manufacture and the cultivation of it is extremely illegal now. And it's looked on so bad by society, and it's like
by the government.
And it's like, wait,
who brought it?
You fucking guys were doing all of this completely illegal. I mean, this is illegal, and it's in the name of national security,
right?
So they say. And I'm, this isn't like a conspiracy that's not true. This is 100% declassified information that is on their website, and most of the information that I got, I went directly to their website because I didn't want to get it from a book or another podcast or something like that where I couldn't verify the information for sure. And so this is all through their declassified documents. So some of the illegal activities that they were conducting were illegal administration of drugs and other chemicals. They were trying to use a lot of different biological chemicals that, not just psychoactive, but they were also trying to figure out things with like biological warfare. They really wanted to try to figure out how to get like a microorganism that would eat petroleum up, and so that they could put it in all of Cuba's petroleum-based products so that they couldn't use fuel. Basically, they would never be able to travel. And then some of the other stuff is kidnapping, which is fucking crazy, because kidnapping is like one of the only things that if you are kidnapped, the FBI will immediately be involved. So that's an extremely high crime. That is something that if the FBI is willing to be 100% just like, okay, we have a kidnapping, the FBI is on it. That's
a big deal.
That's a big deal, hypnosis on unwitting subjects, which is kind of weird, but
combined with other things,
right?
Though,
Yeah. They were also doing isolation studies where they would kidnap people and put them in a dark room, and we'll get a little bit more into that soon. But so that's another one. And then verbal and sexual abuse. I actually read one document that was saying that they had multiple men rape a child, multiple men, like gang rape a fucking kid.
Yeah.
And then there's obviously some other things that I'm sure I'm missing, but these were some of
electroshock.
Electroshock therapy that at the time wasn't illegal, but it was bad. So most of MKUltra was stopped in 1973 because public knowledge was gained in public knowledge was gained in 75 due to Ford's U.S. President Commission on CIA activities within the U.S. So that was just something I had in my notes here. So let's see. I wanted to go over some of the sub-projects that were listed with MKUltra because, a lot of people know about Midnight Climax and a lot of people know about, what is it, Operation Up, Down, or?
Downers and Uppers.
Down Up. I think it's called Down Up, right? Or is it called Downers and Uppers?
I thought it was Downers and Uppers, but either way.
So yes, but a lot of people know of those, but
maybe we should explain that one real fast.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. So that one. Well, I didn't write down. Do you have the downer name of the drug? Do you have that one written down?
I know it was barbiturates.
Okay, yeah. So they basically, on an unwitting citizen, would strap
Citizens.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, there was multiple people.
Yeah. They would strap them down and put an IV in each arm, one IV in each arm. They would inject amphetamine into one arm until they jolted awake and were going crazy while they're strapped down because there's amphetamine rushing through their blood. And then the second they're awake, they'll inject the downer in the other arm until they passed out.
Well, until they were about to pass out.
Yeah, about to pass out. Yeah. I mean, and they would do this for like very prolonged lengths of time.
Yeah, like days.
Yeah.
They would, because they wanted to keep people awake and see what impact that had on them.
Yeah.
And just create delusion. And not only would
It'd be so confusing.
Yeah, not only would they do this, but sometimes they would do this in rooms that had like metal music playing and strobe lights.
Yeah, damn.
What the fuck?
That's like the worst trip I could possibly ever think of.
And these are unwitting people. So these are people that were kidnapped.
Yeah.
And forced to do this without any knowledge of who was doing it.
And probably has never done those drugs before.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
holy shit. Okay. Worst fucking nightmare. Could you imagine you're walking home from a grocery store and you hear a van roll up on you, and who is it? The people that you think are supposed to protect you, but it's not. It's, well, it allegedly is, but they pull up, throw a potato sack over your head, carry you down into a basement somewhere. And then you're like, what's going on? What's going on? And all you have is mirrors around you. And then someone comes in and looks like a fucking weird, one of those creepy doctors that's like in a movie. I'm just guessing. I don't know for sure on that one. But if I were to guess. The
mad scientist guy. Yeah.
He's wearing a white lab coat. He has horrible body odor. And
his hair's all fucked up.
His hair's a little fucked up. And he has glasses, but they just don't fit on his face right. And he comes in and he injects you with 2 IVs. And you're like, what's going on? What's going on? And he just doesn't say anything, which is so creepy.
He's probably talking to his colleagues, and but they're just completely ignoring this person. And
then they just start going at it, Yeah. And then they turn the metal music on, the strobe lights on, and you're held captive in there for a week. But it seems like eternity because when you don't sleep, time moves slow. And you're just hearing the same repetitive fucking music. That's one of my least favorite genres ever. And then the strobes are just going psycho. I mean, this sounds like a fucking nightmare. It sounds like something that would be only in a movie.
Right.
And if that was in a movie, I would be cringing. You know what I mean? Like if that was in a movie, I'd be like, holy shit, they took this really far.
I probably wouldn't even be able to watch it. I have a hard time with movies. Even researching this.
Yeah.
I mean, it just gives me the heebies. It gives me anxiety.
Yeah.
It stresses me out. It makes me feel awful.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Yeah. The Canadian experiments to me, though, I mean, I'm not going to say it's the worst by any means, but that one definitely made me tear up.
Yeah.
I mean, patients would come to this famous Dr. Cameron for mild depression, like postpartum depression, anxiety, like normal things. And they would go in for a treatment because he swears that this 3-week treatment is going to heal this person.
Right.
And then they're subjected to electroshock therapy, LSD.
Well, at first, don't they they induce them with drugs to make them sleep for days?
Yeah, and I was going to say, and then putting, that actually is first. I'm sorry.
That's first. And then, so they put you to sleep for days first.
Yeah.
And then once you're asleep, then they start doing electroshock therapy while you're asleep.
Yeah.
So, and then once you become awake, and this is allegedly after days, right?
Right, after days.
Yeah, so what happens when you can become awake? Is that when they start doing electroshock therapy?
Yeah. So let's just talk about this doctor for a second, though.
Okay.
So back then, he believed that mental illness was a result of poor mothering. So he had this.
Just to say though, back then a lot of mainstream doctors thought that was a really common consensus.
Yeah, so and now we can look back and be like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, I agree. It's just, it's so awful when you like put it all together.
Right.
So he believed it was a consequence of an individual that learned incorrectly, incorrect ways to responding to the world. These learned responses create brain pathways that led to repetitive abnormal behavior. So his idea was to repattern the mind or remother the mind. And then I mean, they would leave with amnesia. They would be childlike. They wouldn't know how to go to the bathroom. They wouldn't know how to read,
Speak.
speak.
Yeah, a lot of people lost their knowledge of words.
Yeah.
They had to be retaught how to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's awful. This one particular woman who just got done having a baby, she had 4 children and a husband. She went in for postpartum depression. Am I saying that right? Postpartum depression?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Anyways, and she went, I think it was for about 3 weeks. And I mean, she doesn't know any of this. She actually just read her file, which is so sad to me.
Yeah.
She forgot her children. She forgot her husband.
Well, and
She
wasn't
didn't-
it like, I think her husband saw that or maybe she saw on the news or something that people are suing this doctor, and that's
Yeah.
how she found out about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that just makes me so upset.
Yeah,
But, oh, and they would play messages on repeat.
right.
So, I mean, sometimes it would be repeated up to 500,000 times.
Fuck that.
Yeah, 500,000. And he would switch between really positive things and really negative things. So it'd be so confusing. I mean, just the contrast in that alone being repeated over and over again would just make you go crazy.
Yeah,
He called this psychic driving.
that's crazy. I mean,
Yeah, he's seriously insane. I was watching him respond, and he's like, "Well, it was harsh for the staff too," and he starts defending the staff, and I'm like, but he didn't say anything about how he felt bad for the patients.
yeah.
And I'm like, oh,
Yeah. I mean, a lot of
me.
people actually compared him to that crazy Nazi scientist. I can't think of, the guy that would operate on twins and like
oh
try to.
yes, for the Holocaust. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I can't think of his fucking name right now. But he's
Yeah.
really famous. I should definitely know his name, but I can't think of it right now.
Yeah, it's floating around on Facebook. I'm
It's
sure people
floating
know.
around on my fucking head
what
too. I
we're
just
talking
can't
about.
grab it. I have too much shit in there. So I just wanted to go over a list of some of the other sub projects that might not be quite as known. And there is 180 of these, but I'm definitely not going to read that many. So I'm going to start kind of at the beginning of the sub projects and just kind of work my way through it. And I'm sorry if this is boring for listeners, but it really does give an idea of what the goal was of this.
Before we move on,
Yeah.
I forgot about this, but one of the patients of Dr. Cameron's was asleep for 65 days straight.
That seems impossible. That's crazy.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
That's just a wild fact.
So sub project 6 is the one I'm going to start with, and then I'm not going to number every single one of these, but find LSD supplier. Previous supplier was Sandoz, Switzerland. So when the CIA first came up with the idea of using LSD, it was because there was this company in Switzerland, which was Sandoz Pharmaceuticals, and that was who the famous Albert Hoffman worked for. He I don't know if anybody has ever heard this story about how LSD was created. I'm sorry, I'm just going to go over it really quick. But basically Hoffman was, he was a chemist, and he had created LSD, and he had accidentally ingested some and felt like he was crazy for a little while. And then he didn't know what had caused this initially. So he was just kind of like, because LSD is such a powerful chemical that he had just was breathing. And that's how the first time, this isn't the bicycle story, but the first time that he ever felt it, he felt a little bit crazy. His thoughts were a little erratic. He didn't really know what it was, but he wasn't on like a full on LSD trip yet.
Yeah.
So he was like really curious what that was. And then he started to administer it to some of the animals, and they started acting kind of erratic as well. And so he was really curious about what LSD was. And so he started to, back in the day, it was really common for drugs to be tested on the chemist, like by them, ingesting it. So he was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to see what's going on with this. And he decided to take like a really small amount, and he started with like, I think 200 micrograms, which to him, he was thinking that he would start out with a really small amount and then slowly tune it up. But that is a pretty decent dose
amount. Yeah.
I mean, it's not a crazy superhero dose, but it'll definitely get you lifted. And so he started to take it, and then he started feeling uneasy, and he thought that he made a mistake, and so he decided to ride his bicycle home. And then this is where the famous story of Hoffman's bicycle comes. And so he's riding the bicycle home, and all of these colors are flowing around him, and he's just starting to see, this vibrant world. And he was immediately noticing that he could like sense other people's personalities and things like that. So he got home and he was panicked. He thought he would never come back from this trip. So he called over his friend and coworker, and he started to write down in his journal about, the experience that he was having. And his friend kind of like tried to calm him down a little bit. And then he was drinking milk. I remember that part of the story distinctly for some reason. And this is just based off of memory, so I'm really sorry if I got this wrong. I mean, it's pretty right though. But yeah. And so anyways, that's kind of how the story of LSD was first figured out, that it was a psychedelic. And there was a lot of talk about this and how this could be used for psychotherapy. Mm-hmm. And so Hoffman, started to share this, and they started to do different trials and with volunteers, and the United States got wind of this, and this is kind of how it first was introduced to the United States. It was actually the United States found out about it, and the CIA wanted to see what they could use it for. Yeah. So they actually bought all of Sandoz supply of LSD. Mm-hmm. They wanted to be the only country that had it. They didn't want any of the other countries to have it.
Yeah, because it would be, they could utilize this in war. Yeah. Spies.
Yeah. So so they were actually the first people. The United States was really the first. The CIA was the first people in the United States to have this drug, which is really interesting because later on it ends up being part of the counterculture. So, anyways, so.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic.
Yeah, Subproject 6 was to find a new LSD supplier because the previous supplier was Sandoz, but they wanted one closer to home. Subproject 7 was LSD research. Subproject 8 was study biochemical, neurological, sociological, and clinical aspects of LSD. Subproject 10 was study the effects of LSD on people with multiple personality disorders, which I found to be kind of interesting. So there you go. There's one where they're using LSD on people that should not have LSD being used on them. Yeah. But they obviously didn't know that at the time. They probably thought it could actually help these people because when you're on LSD, you kind of become a different person. Mm-hmm. So I think the thought there was that they'd be able to use this to take that away, take the multiple personalities away. Subproject 10 was study the effects of LSD. Oh, I just said that one. Sorry. Subproject 17 was try to figure out how to synthesize LSD. And I'm jumping just so everybody knows I'm not just skipping a bunch by accident. I'm just skipping. I went just to the ones that I found to be important. So, Subproject.
Yeah, we're going to be skipping a lot just because there's so much.
Subproject 39 was to exploit the minds of 140 confirmed sexual psychopaths because it could be similar to interrogations on the feeble-minded. And this was in a state hospital. Subproject 46 was develop a specific antidote for LSD. And that was, just to basically, if it was done to them, they could get themselves off of it if they needed to. Subproject 51 was isolate and identify natural occurring psychological plots. Much of this was mushrooms. And then 54 was study brain concussions. So that is a really crazy thing that they did where they would actually try to concuss people using either electroshock therapy or using sound. And that was because they thought that concussions would make you forget information, which obviously it does. And this was a big part of Dr. Cameron's work. Wow. Was trying to basically he would like turn up the electroshock therapy like 100 times more than it should be used and try to concuss patients and make them have permanent memory loss.
Yeah.
Another subproject 57 was perform research on sleep and insomnia with emphasis on narcosis-induced sleep. So, they're trying to use drugs to get people to sleep and then study what happens when they were sleeping versus what happens when they were suffering from insomnia. And that kind of comes back to the uppers and downers. Subproject 66 was test techniques for predicting response of subjects when given alcohol and LSD. So they just, that was another one that was unwitting. And by the way, if you go onto the government website, when they show the subprojects, if you want to research any of these, it'll actually tell you whether or not the patients were unwitting or if they were knowing or if it was completely confidential. So they would just kidnap people and not tell not tell anybody, not write the information down or anything, which is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Another one was test the effects of human behavior while subjects were given repeated verbal signals during isolation for 7 to 10 days under the influence of LSD. And there was 100 cases of this by Dr. Cameron. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Subproject 73, establish whether hypnosis can be increased during the use of drugs such as alcohol, scopolamine, LSD, and mescaline. And I wanted to do a note on this actually, just because scopolamine, for those of you that don't know, it's in Dramamine, which is, oh my gosh.
Motion sickness?
Motion sickness medication. And it's also what is called the devil's breath. And do you remember that drug? The devil's breath?
Yeah.
And that was allegedly the drug that would make anybody become your zombie and you could tell them what to do.
Oh.
So that was one that was really popularized by a Vice magazine.
Yeah.
They were saying that in Colombia, I think, there were these prostitutes that were just going up and breathing it into your face and making you become their slave by...
Give them your money.
Yeah. So I unfortunately didn't do much research on this on scopolamine itself, because that's a whole nother topic. But I have found different reviews of that. I've heard that this was a highly misleading article by Vice, that it's not really as significant as what they made it sound like. But I need to do more research. So don't take my word for that.
Gosh, I couldn't imagine tripping for 2 weeks. That'd be freaking awful.
Well, I mean, I've done that.
Yeah, knowingly.
Oh, yeah. So subproject 86, design and build mini polygraph machines for using on in-field unwitting subjects. So that I found to be crazy, because when you're using a polygraph machine, they hook your brain up to electrodes and they judge, emotion and things like that. So I can't even imagine building a mini polygraph machine. But I do think that it's kind of interesting, because I know that they have cameras that can pick up on facial expressions and know that people are being dishonest or if they're up to something. So, nowadays I know that they use that in airports and malls and things like that. Subproject 102, behavior of naturally formed groups of boys as a function of group membership. So they were just basically watching groups of young kids to try to see what their behavior patterns were, if they were friends versus if they weren't friends, and try to catch that behavior pattern. Study nonverbal communication between children that reunited after 5 years of not seeing each other. So this is kind of interesting. They were trying to see basically groups of people that hadn't seen each other or talked to each other in 5 years, just how they reacted when they saw each other, with the facial expressions and stuff. I have no fucking clue what this has to do with mind control.
Yeah, I was gonna say that seems really
irrelevant,
obsolete.
But it was one of the projects, so who knows? I'm sure that they had a reason for it.
Well, they had hundreds. They're probably doing all sorts of
weird shit, and there's this is only what we know of.
Right.
Study microorganisms as a function of petroleum to try to sabotage petroleum trade, which I talked about that a little bit earlier. Experimentation relating to design manufacturing of a system that can expel gases and aerosols. So I thought that was interesting. Basically, they're trying to come up with systems that could push gas really fast from a non-known direction, to basically try to poison people or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe poison, maybe get something else like LSD. Who knows?
Yeah.
So they also had the Yoruba witchcraft study, which was African witch doctors, and they were just trying to get information from them. Subproject 124 was investigating how to induce a drug-like state by using carbon dioxide on unwitting subjects through inhalation. So that's crazy. Yeah, so they were
Carbon dioxide.
Yeah, like exhaust.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were probably like going to someone's hotel room or something and then like pumping fucking carbon dioxide, which is lethal, into the air and watching what happened. And dude, like,
and don't they just die?
Maybe. I mean,
they
I don't know.
get
I don't
oxygen, they will.
Yeah, I don't know how that works, but I do know that this is fucking crazy, and that what's crazy about this is we really don't know how many people died as a result of this, because everything was kept private. Everything, all the subjects were unwitting, so they didn't even have their names in some of these situations. So who fucking knows how many people died? All they know is that they did it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And this is just a small portion of what's been released. I just cannot wrap my fucking mind around that.
It's frustrating.
Yeah. So they also wanted to study the difference between attitude and body type, which is weird.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is weird.
And it's kind of cool because there is definitely differences in attitude with certain body types. So that's kind of interesting, you know. Provide the services of plant pathologists to assist in developing philosophy of limited anti-crop warfare. And so there was basically a study that was done that made sugar crop vulnerabilities in a worldwide base. So they were trying to figure out ways to destroy crops through microorganisms. So if there was like there was a country that was growing hemp, maybe they could figure out some sort of mold or something that would wipe out the crop. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in Northern California that could give them that information. So yeah, that was just some of this crazy ass sub projects I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
So what other info do you have over there?
Well, I was just gonna say, for those of you who have never done acid on accident, it's like the worst thing in the world, and it's so confusing. Have you ever done acid on accident?
Oh yeah,
Our first time.
Yeah,
you remember
that's
that?
True. But that was also the first time we ever did psychedelics
at all. Yeah.
So I think that's part of the reason why that was so bad. But most of these people probably had never done it either, because it was completely new and introduced, and most people had no idea what a psychedelic even was.
And it was an extreme amount for prolonged periods of time. Ours was just one for one night, and we ended up having fun way later in the morning.
Right.
But I mean, during that whole night, it was awful.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to imagine that. First of all, back in the 50s and 60s, or early 60s, obviously, people didn't even know what psychedelics were.
Yeah.
They had never even heard of this. Mushrooms weren't here yet.
Yeah.
Acid wasn't here yet.
Wow.
Vision journeys weren't even a thing for Native Americans until, I believe, the mid 20th century. Jesus, I'm sorry.
Peyote for them.
Yeah, but that was actually a relatively recent thing. A lot of people think that they had been doing that for centuries or something, and that's not the case. It's really new that they did that.
Oh.
So psychedelics were pretty unknown back then, but people did know of crazy fucks.
Yeah.
And so could you imagine not knowing anything about psychedelics, and then all of a sudden you start to go into a psychedelic state,
and you lose your mind,
and you start thinking that you're fucking psychotic because you've heard of people that are crazy, basically, and you think that you're going crazy.
Oh, the brain is so sensitive.
Yeah, I've
definitely been on trips before where I don't know if I'm going to be the same again or not. Or you start thinking, you hear about, people who have tripped and don't come back for a year. Like, that's real thing for some people.
Yeah, well, I think that I think that just has to do with people that suffer or were going to suffer from some sort of mental disorder later on in life,
brain
and
chemistry.
It induces them. Right?
Yeah.
So that's crazy. I mean, there's a lot of people that like they eat psychedelics and they don't ever quote unquote come back, but it's not that they don't come back from the acid trip. It's just that induces their mental disorder that they might never have gotten but they were predisposed to it. And this is what introduced them into that state of mind.
Who was just talking about that? That one young kid on Joe Rogan podcast. The guy with the glasses. He's all about drugs being
Hamilton
decriminalized.
Morris.
Gosh, yeah, that was really cool to hear him say that.
He's a really cool guy to check out.
He's smart.
I highly recommend checking out anything that Hamilton Morris is a part of. It's really interesting. He talks about different pharmacological aspects of drugs, and he has tried just about everything out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's crazy hearing some of his stories. I was listening to a different podcast with him on a different one, and I can't remember what podcast it was. Sorry, but he was talking about just like taking like this crazy psychedelic to try to help him sleep or something, and then he ends up like hallucinating, like going to this different universe basically.
Seems
and
like
shit.
a bad idea.
Yeah,
to sleep.
I know. He's funny. He's kind of he's really young too, which is crazy.
He's like your age, isn't he?
I think so. Yeah, he's
27?
so smart. I don't know if he's
Not
27. I
quite
know he's
30
somewhere around there. He might be 30.
Yeah.
I think he might be 30.
Still.
But geez, dude, that guy he's really fucking smart, and he looks at things from such a good, nuanced place. He doesn't get weird and woo-woo with psychedelics, which I love.
Yeah.
You know, I love that he like knows that it's just a, chemical reaction in the brain. It's not like
just
you're
as
going
beautiful though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how he explains it too. It's like, it's not, you're not going into another dimension or whatever. Your perception of reality is just altered. And I just think that's really cool, because a lot of times, people get that confused. They think that because they experience something, that means that is what it is.
Well, it is what it is to them. I don't know. I feel like just because it's not an actual different dimension, they're still experiencing that.
Well, no, I understand that, but that's not really what I'm saying. I'm saying that, like, yes, that is a powerful experience for them. But a lot of people, like for example, like putting drugs aside, with near-death experiences, people say that with near-death experiences, they saw their family and they saw, these bright lights and the gates of heaven and all this stuff. But, we can induce near-death experiences using electrodes on people. We can actually have them have the exact same experience that they would have if they were having a near-death experience, because it's just a part of the brain that gets excited and you just start to hallucinate. And it's probably activating parts of the brain that
Will
have
you explain
some
electrodes?
Sort of, well, it's like what is used in electroshock therapy.
Oh, okay. So they're just like kind of hooking it up on your brain and
on different parts of the brain, and it excites those parts of the brain. You can. So, I mean, with neurobiologists and stuff, they know where certain parts of the brain, like, for example, your auditory, part of the brain is like, it's close to the part of your brain that gives feeling, like emotions and stuff like that. So, your visual cortex is like not by that. So when you see art that's really uplifting and motivational, it doesn't give you that same like intense feeling that music gives you. But music actually activates an emotional response in the body because of where it's like your auditory cortex is.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's really
because that's
cool.
kind of how it is for me sometimes.
That's how it is for everybody.
When I look at art versus like when I hear music.
Yeah,
like music will make me cry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can actually, it hits your nervous system a certain way. You get goosebumps. Like all these things have to do with where it's located in the brain. So that being said, you can have those parts of the brain excited just by using some sort of electric shock. But also, like people that have had open, brain surgery, because the brain has no nerves in it whatsoever. Like if someone poked your brain, you wouldn't feel it. You wouldn't.
Tingly.
No, it's not at all.
It makes me tingly.
Well, I mean, okay, that's not technically true, but it wouldn't be painful. There's no nerves. Like it's not like.
But would you like see some weird shit for a second?
Well, they can prod it and stuff like that, and they do. That's what I was gonna say. With brain surgery, you can elect to be awake during it because it's not painful.
What?
And they'll say like, okay, like we're gonna keep you under, and we're just gonna ask you some questions, and they'll start hitting different parts and ask the subject like what they're experiencing, and they'll say, oh my god, I'm 8 feet above my body and I can see over us, and then they'll say, okay, great, and they'll poke this part and they're like, oh, I can smell the ice cream that I had when I was 8 years old,
Jesus.
And then they'll poke another part of the brain and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm having an orgasm or something, So that's kind of how they started to really understand and be able to map out part of the brain.
Gives me the heebies.
Yeah, it's really cool. So
that's a big nope for me, though. I would not want to stay awake during that.
Yeah.
You would probably, huh?
Definitely. Yeah, most definitely. I wish I could have it done just to do that. I'm serious.
You're a freak.
I know. I would love that.
Awful.
It'd be so fucking cool. I mean,
I don't know why that creeps me out so much.
Interests me so much. I think that it's great. And so what psychedelics like LSD does is it's a substance that there's your serotonin receptors or whatever in the brain, and it takes and it connects to it, and it's a molecule that's very similar in structure as what the receptors are. So it bonds to it and it changes the structure of it just a little bit. And then when your neurons connect to it, it has different effects on your mind. Wow. So that's kind of what it is. And knowing like what it does to the brain, it's like, oh man, it's just crazy.
It's really like, cool.
I know, it is really cool. And this is the same thing that happens with all drugs though. Caffeine, I mean, not serotonin, but dopamine is, induced by caffeine, and it just alters the brain in a different way. And
that's the reward system, right? Dopamine?
Yes. Oh. Yeah. So it's really cool. And I, for anybody that's listening, I highly suggest reading Robert Sapolsky's Behave book. It's so amazing. It goes into different, like the different biology of the brain. It talks about things like meth and what that does to the brain. And it's just, I love that book. I've read it like 3 times now. Well, listen to it, but.
I'm the worst person in the world. I've been meaning to read that book for like ever. Because I love him.
Yeah, you have to really, really understand like what, I mean, I don't, but you have to really, really understand the different regions of the brain and what they do.
Yes. It can be a little confusing.
Yeah, I would suggest reading some of his earlier books, like Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. That's one. But I would recommend reading some of his earlier books if you don't know shit about the brain.
Does that have to do with stress? Why zebras don't get ulcers?
Well, kind of. I mean, because zebras do get stressed. They just get stressed in a different way.
Oh.
And it's more of just a catchy title than anything.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, it is talking about stress and just talking about how stress on humans is induced in a different way because we don't have those same kind of fight or flight responses that we have in nature.
Yeah.
So zebras, they have to deal with things like a lion chasing them. So they get extremely stressed under those situations, where for us, we don't have to deal with that. It's kind of like what we were talking about last week in that podcast. We don't have to deal with those kinds of stressors anymore. So now we get stressed out about things like traffic.
Yeah.
Or, somebody
Bills,
saying, somebody saying something racist on Twitter or whatever it is. Like, and it's all those things are totally normal human interactions. Like it's extremely, like it is a normal response for us to be upset about something that happens on a social platform because, that is our version of a tribe now. And for, thousands, if not millions of years, we lived in tribes and cohabitated in these, small clusters of people. And it was important for us to make sure that the people that were a part of our tribe were doing things by the book. So we have gotten way far away from MKUltra, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say, though, is because we lived in tribes, we wanted to know what guy was going to fucking, kill someone in the tribe or try to eat more food than the other people, disrespect our women, things like that, and then exile them basically. So for us now, we still have that old mentality of how we need to, know what's going on in our tribe, but we don't live in tribes. We live in houses with our family, guarded off from the world. So then you get on social media where you see all of these people and they're like, quote unquote, a part of our tribe. Just mentally we think that. And then when we see them doing something that disgusts us, we respond in
Exile.
we respond in a way to try to bring it to the forefront of everybody's knowledge. The problem with
That's
this,
why people call people out on social media so much.
oh, absolutely.
I've always felt, well, I mean, it kind of depends on the situation, of course. But sometimes it's super distasteful. I'm like, why would you do that on social media? Like,
Well, it's virtue signaling. It's trying to show. So it's kind of almost the opposite of what we're talking about in a way. It's like, instead of saying, look at what this person's doing, we need to be aware of this. It's like, look at what I'm doing. You should all be aware of this.
Yeah.
And it's showing them that you're like the best part of the group. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Which gives you brownie points. Like it gets dudes laid. It gets chicks, more attention and gets them laid or whatever. So that's kind of like where virtue signaling kind of comes from, which is why I hate social media, because it's not real, But
yeah, I've been thinking a lot about it lately.
yeah. It's crazy. I mean, I really think that like 100 years from now, people are going to be like, that was the best, worst thing that ever happened to humanity, if we're even still here. Because it's like, it's really good
is the
for
best thing.
Yeah, it's best in spreading information, keeping contacts with people, but it's also the worst because it just destroys relationships.
Yeah, and there's misinformation and
there's misinformation, and then you're all of a sudden you have your family that lives in a completely different area, and they're like, yeah, Trump is the best. He's bringing jobs back to Wisconsin, and then you're like, oh my gosh, Trump is an asshole. He's grabbing pussies, and I live in San Francisco, and that's not the way that we live over here. And so it just makes you like fight with people that you probably shouldn't be fighting with. I mean, it's
pointless.
Pointless. It's not realistic. Obviously, those people need to learn and evolve and stuff, but yelling at them on Twitter isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
So, anyways, back to MKUltra. So there was some deaths that were reported because of MKUltra. There's only one under the guise of the CIA, and that's Frank Olson.
That was the first death.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the only one that's ever been reported by the CIA.
Oh.
That's what I'm saying. They technically, because Frank Olson, was a part of the CIA.
Right.
He worked with the CIA. They obviously had information on that because it was inside of the company. But with the rest of them, I don't think that they
even reported it.
Right. If there were, I mean, that's the problem. We don't know. But I'm sure that if this one guy who was a part of the project killed himself, there's probably multiple people that did or ended up dying as a result of overdosing or something like that.
So he was the one that committed suicide.
Allegedly. A lot of people think that the CIA killed him, like threw him off of a building.
That's right, because he jumped.
Yeah,
in quotes.
Yeah.
Because he was given LSD.
Right.
And he went.
What happened was, he was a biochemist, and he was traveling for work, and he was going over to like Germany and these other countries in Europe. And he started to notice that these countries were using a drug that he came up with to torture people before they killed them. And so he was extremely unhappy about this. He thought it was, a bad use of his drug. And he brought that to the CIA's attention. Well, he started saying that he didn't think this was right, and he was going to bring it to the public sector.
Wow.
Okay, so then they all went on a retreat, and someone gave him like a massive dose of LSD in brandy, and he started to think that he was losing his mind. He ran away from this camp. It was, I think, in Maryland, in Deep Creek Lake or something like that in Maryland. He ran away from this camp. They couldn't find him. They were all freaking out because they thought that he was going to tattletale or whatever. And so they ended up finding him, like, I think the next day, and he was like hiding somewhere, and they found him, and they actually submitted him to a psychiatric hospital, a CIA psychiatric hospital.
Oh my God.
And then he came back to work and wasn't really the same, and then jumped out of a window and killed himself.
Wow.
So,
and his wife didn't know the reason why he died until 22 years later.
Yeah, it's
22.
Crazy. Yeah.
That's insane. Poor lady.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So then there was also with the Army section of, it wasn't the CIA, but it was a part of MKUltra. There was a guy that was given, I think, barbiturates or something, and he ended up overdosing. So that was another death that was the result of this. But those two are the only ones that I believe are actually documented Who knows how many actually were out there?
I'm sure there's so much more.
I bet there's a ton.
I mean, just based on what we read, like.
Well, yeah, they didn't really even know what the dosage should be. They were
Yeah.
giving all these people crazy doses, and they were all not knowing. They probably ran out to traffic and fucking killed themselves or went home and shot themselves in the head because they didn't want
Yeah.
their family to think they were crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah, or a lot of them probably did die while they had the IV in their arm, you know?
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, it's kind of all speculation from here, but another thing that I wanted to mention that was just kind of a little part of Idaho's involvement was that there's this dude Frank Church. You might have heard of him because the Frank Church Reserve. You know, that's a big. It's
Yeah.
like the largest reserve in the United States, and that's named after him. But he was a senator from Idaho that got a hold of these documents and was part of the crew that was really trying to get this charged and prosecuted. So he had the Frank Church Commission. And Frank Church was actually responsible for a lot of things that were brought out about the CIA. He was a big advocate for trying to get the American public to know what the CIA was doing because he was worried that the United States was going to turn into a tyrannical government.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
super
kind of
cool.
It's cool that, you know, it brings Idaho into the picture a little bit since that's where we live.
Yeah. I
But-
mean, as bad as this was, thank God there were lawsuits.
Yeah.
And
I mean, yeah, I guess.
not that fixes anything.
Yeah.
However, I
Yeah.
don't even know what to say.
It's crazy, man.
I'm trying to make light of it, but I'm
Yeah.
having a hard time right now.
Well, and okay, so if this was going on in the 50s and 60s during, like, you know, reserved America when people were still wearing dresses and women weren't working and whatever,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? If this was going on then, just imagine what's going on now. I mean,
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but there's some shit that's going on that we don't
You think
ever
so?
want to know about. I bet there's crazier shit than this going on right now. I bet. You know?
I mean, just the small percentage of things we do know just about this project.
Yeah. Well,
I
I mean,
can't
and
even
then there's
imagine.
other crazy projects where, like, they would seed the clouds in San Francisco for the fog and poison the entire city.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's just crazy shit, man.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crazy shit the CIA is up to. I think that the CIA needs to be shut the fuck down. Like,
Agreed.
I would probably join the CIA. I think it'd be kind of a fun job. Not doing all this weird shit, but just some of the other stuff that they do, like in other countries and stuff. Like, I'd probably do that. But it's not a cool division of the government. I'm just saying, I'm a hypocrite in a way because I think it'd
Bring it down from the inside?
maybe, who knows? I'm sure there's lots of people that have tried to do that got fucking killed in some way
Oh,
or
I'm
another.
sure they didn't succeed. I mean,
Oh,
that's
no
no
way.
joke,
dude. I mean, it's like what's his name? The guy that brought down the NSA. Fucking
know.
Edward Snowden.
Oh,
It's like Edward
yeah.
Snowden, how when he was going to bring down the NSA, he found out that they were fucking tapping his house and tapping all this shit. And he was just working for the NSA.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine, not that the NSA is a small thing, but actually Frank Church brought down the NSA too in the 60s and 70s. He was,
Did anything happen to him?
well, he died, but I don't know if it was
How'd he
related or not.
die?
He died from tumor in his liver, I think, or something. So,
Huh.
I mean, who knows? But
Yeah.
the crazy thing about like Snowden was that they were monitoring everything he was doing, and he figured it out. He figured out that they were doing it.
He was super smart.
Yeah.
Isn't he still like in Russia?
I don't know. I think so. I think he's in Russia. Yeah.
But he's still fleeing.
Yeah. I mean, I can't. We really need to get someone in office with their fucking head on straight to get him.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh, wait,
dude,
to get, what do you mean?
to let him off.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's ridiculous that we are like criminally prosecuting someone that was bringing criminal acts to the forefront.
I know.
I mean, it's
We're
like,
so backwards.
yeah, it's like, dude, okay. Imagine if there was a guy that was working with the MKUltra that brought this to the public sphere while it was going on. He would be charged as a criminal. I mean, that's fucking crazy.
Absolutely
These people were
crazy.
murdering people
Yeah.
and studying the effects on them.
Raping people,
Raping
raping
people,
kids.
I mean, it's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And this is who is supposed to protect us, right?
Yeah.
This is who's supposed to protect Americans. I mean, like, okay, Not saying this would be any better, but why the fuck didn't they at least do it in a different country? They're supposed to be on our side.
Yeah, I wouldn't be better.
I'm not saying it's better. I'm not at all saying it's better. We would still be having the same exact conversation. I would still have an entire podcast about it.
Probably be because, I mean, they can control it. It's their citizens. I mean, could you imagine in another country?
Well, they did do it in other countries too, by the way. I mean, it's not that I'm just saying.
I'm saying the risk was lower if they did it to their own citizens.
I guess.
They're the ones.
But what's the okay? So in my opinion, it's like the risk is higher because you create distrust in the government, and that is a huge risk.
It's not like they thought about that when they were doing this, though. They didn't give a shit.
Yeah, they should have
trust in their government. I mean. Yeah.
Well, they also thought that this was never going to get out, which is why he had all the files destroyed.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, okay. So he had all these files allegedly destroyed, fucked up, missed 20,000 files. But how many things has he had destroyed, or have they had destroyed?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
mm-hmm.
How many things? A lot of the 9/11 conspiracy theorists think that the Tower 7 was destroyed because that's where CIA kept their paper documents,
mm-hmm. Right.
And I don't know enough about that. I'm not going to fucking go on that boat or that bandwagon. I have no idea. But if that's true, I mean, think about how that could have been part of that whole operation. Maybe they knew that, terrorists were going to hijack planes and they were going to bring down the Twin Towers, and they said this will be a good day for us to blow up this one, and it wasn't. You know what I mean? Because I tend to believe that if there is a conspiracy with 9/11, it's some sort of gray area,
kind of in between.
Yeah, it's not like, I don't think that the whole thing was the government. I don't think it was the whole thing that was like some sort of coup.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was probably like the government knew something about it because we have way more intelligence than the government will ever let us know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the United States has like, crazy intelligence.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that they probably knew something was going to happen, and maybe they used it to their advantage. Who knows? I mean, and who knows? Okay. Who knows if the CIA even told the other branches of government? The CIA totally operates by themselves. I mean, that's the crazy part. And sometimes the agents,
just to make it look really, really real.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's just certain people in the CIA that knew about this going on, and they took advantage of it because the Central Intelligence Agency, their whole thing is intelligence, right? So they're just trying to figure out what other people are planning to do. So it's like, what if they knew that these terrorists were going to attack?
Yeah.
And then they kind of put these other wheels in motion,
Yeah.
Who knows, right? Someday, hopefully we'll know, but they probably destroyed the fucking files.
Yeah, they're good at that.
Yeah.
So yeah, if Eric and I get kidnapped in the next few days,
we're not going to get
I'm just
kidnapped.
kidding.
They don't give two fucks about us.
I know.
They don't give two fucks. But
that's actually someone that I work with told me that. It's like, be careful. My dad
really?
says shit like that to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, Dad, I'm talking about something that everyone knows about. It's all good. Yeah. Relax.
No, there's so many. This is stuff that's already in the public sphere,
yeah.
and we don't know shit. We only know what everybody else knows, right? I mean, it's not like
we still don't know like half of it.
Not even half. I mean, not even a fucking 16th probably. But it's crazy. I remember back in the day when we used to study, or I don't want to say study, but used to watch conspiracy theory documentaries and stuff. And I was like, I remember thinking everything was a conspiracy.
Yeah, you can't go too far to that side.
Yeah, and
I did
tends
too.
to happen. I remember I was so far into conspiracies that when the co-op in Boise got E. coli or whatever, salmonella, I thought that Whole Foods did it to them.
What?
Yeah, because Whole Foods was just getting ready to open, and so I was like,
"No, they were already opened."
Well, yeah, I mean, whatever, they were already open, but I thought, oh my god, you know what? I bet it was. I bet Whole Foods poisoned the co-op's food to try to get more people to go to Whole Foods. And I remember, I thought about that today actually. I just remember.
You've never told me that. That's so
well,
funny.
I just thought everything was a conspiracy back then, and you have to be really careful of that,
Yeah.
because. The second that you start thinking everything is a conspiracy,
it's just as bad.
It's worse.
Yeah, just as bad as watching Fox News and it's just as bad as the other side believing everything the mainstream media tells you.
Right, and I think that it's almost worse though because it creates nobody's gonna listen to you when you're trying to explain a conspiracy that might be true. So if
True.
I sat here and went over all of this MKUltra shit with everybody, and then right afterwards I start talking about how the fucking Earth is flat and the moon's hollow, and whatever.
Whatever.
And then people are going to be like,
All
okay,
of the
this guy
conspiracies.
is a little crazy. I don't know what we can believe and what we can't believe,
Right. So they're probably just going to, turn away to everything that you said.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of like part of the problem with people like
Truth
Alex Jones.
is important. Yeah. Alex Jones is the epitome of that example.
Yeah. Alex Jones is crazy, dude.
He's hilarious, though.
He is hilarious.
God.
If his show was satire, I would watch it every fucking day.
You have been playing that clip every day for like the last week.
I'm gonna play that on the outro of this.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's funny.
It's so funny. Hopefully I can find it.
I wake up to this. The last week I've been waking up to this clip of Alex Jones.
This is so funny. Alex Jones, if you're listening to this, I love you.
He's not.
I want to hug you.
Big old bear hug.
I know he's not listening to this. I bet you could have a really good time with that dude if you got just a little bit of blowing hookers. I'm serious. I bet he would turn into a whole different person. He'd probably still think it was a conspiracy though. I actually think that he believes the shit that he says.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, I really do.
I've believed crazy shit in my life,
Yeah. I mean, I think that he's just been doing it for so long that it's like he's like lied so much that he believes it.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it becomes his identity and he's protecting that.
Yeah.
And then, that's who he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, anyways.
But yeah, Alex Jones clip coming up.
Yeah. And I guess that's it for MKUltra,
Yeah.
This was really, really difficult to research. And I hope that we gave you guys enough information. If you feel like you're lacking, fucking go look into it.
There's so many documentaries.
There's so much. Well, and there's so many documents. If you go onto the CIA's website, you can see all of these documents that have been released. Be careful, though. There's a lot of bullshit out there with MKUltra. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of bullshit.
And there doesn't need to be, because the truth is insane.
Yeah, it's insane enough. But I mean, there's a lot of, like, if you go onto the internet and you type in MKUltra, you're going to see, like, Katy Perry under mind control, like just dumb shit. Just ignore that. Stick to the facts. Watch documentaries that were done by reputable companies, not just every goddamn YouTube clip, because there are some stupid shit. There's just dumb shit out there, and they think MKUltra is going on still today, and it's like, no, it's not. That project was closed down. There might be things like it, but it's not MKUltra anymore. It's named something else. So like you're spreading misinformation right off the top.
Slap that name on it.
Yeah, so just, if it's something that really interests you, just do some research and figure it out, and just always be mindful, not everything is as it seems.
True.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Follow us on Instagram at MindMelt Podcast, and go ahead and give us a review if this is something that interests you. Candra and I will be doing an in discussion topic for our next podcast, and then Sierra, my sister, is going to come over and we're going to do an actual topic, which is prison overcrowding, and we're going to talk about the current prison problem that we have and things like privatized prisons and why those might be a problem. So until next time, thank you so much for listening to Mind Melt Podcast.
Peace out.
Peace out.
There's no video of President Trump sucking a ding dong. And so what if there was? That's a lot better than World War III, Owen. I never sucked any ding dongs. But I'll tell you, if they were going to blackmail me to start World War III about one, I'd say, hey, I sucked a golf ball through a freaking garden hose.
Didn't you already tell Der Spiegel that?
No, the son of a bitch walked in there in my own office when I'd splattered stuff on myself and I was changing shirts. He goes, oh, that's a good shot. Let's get your shirts. And then he goes, I go, hey, have some of this chicken and sausage. So technically I said, Jones offered me his sausage. Yeah, give me a break, you son of a bitch. I like women, not men. And if I liked men, I'd be proud of it. I'd have a line of them. But I ain't ever been in bed with no man. I've been in bed with probably 300 women. And you sons of bitches sit there and you play these games, and I'm sick of it. So